Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. From today we will start new Donghua explanation. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 68 based on novel. So let's start. The young students were clearly afraid of him, and everyone began to get back to work, with only a handful still casting curious gazes over from time to time. Hua Yuhao asked politely, "May I know your name, teacher?" The male teacher said with a deep voice, "My name is Zhang Zhon. Greetings, teacher Zheng. I'm really sorry about what just happened, and I promise we will never do it again. My name is Hua Yuhao." Zhang Zhon nodded to acknowledge his name, and said earnestly, "All you teenagers, once you reach adolescence, it's natural for guys and girls to feel good about each other. However, you have to remember this is an academy, and while us teachers can't control how you develop after graduation, you need to watch your behavior and your words when you're still inside the academy. Furthermore, it's not an easy task to join Shrek Academy. You need to work hard when you're here, you can't waste your youth. Even if you can't join the inner courtyard, you should at least aim to graduate smoothly from the outer courtyard. I can understand youths dating each other, but you guys need to have moderation, and you can't overdo it. Do you understand?" Hua Yuhao nodded guiltily as Zhang Zhon chided him. Zhang Zhon's words whipped him until his face started to blush, but he began to have an even better impression of this teacher. "Oh, yes, you haven't told me which class you're from. Judging by your age, you should in year 5, give or take. Let me think, which teachers are in charge of year 5's classes?" Hua Yuhao quickly explained, "Don't trouble yourself, sir. I'm from teacher Ju Yi's class." "Oh, teacher Ju." Zhang Zhon carried on naturally, but then his eyes widened in the next moment, while his voice seemed to become an octave higher. "What? You're from Ju Yi's class, yes? What's the matter?" It was Hua Yuhao's turn to be a little confused. Zhang Zhon said with a worried look on his face, "You silly boy, why didn't you say so earlier? If you had told me you were from Ju Yi's class, I wouldn't have asked you to go find her. Aren't you digging your own grave? Do you not know about old Lady Ju's temper? If she gets angry, she may just expel the two of you. Oh man, you should really have told me earlier." Hua Yuhao felt more heat rush to his head as he saw Zhang Zhon's troubled look, and his nose began to feel a little sour. This teacher is so cute. We've never met before, and is already so concerned when he learned that I'm teacher Ju's student. However, teacher Ju's terrifying reputation seems like it's still quite well known. Zhang Zhon suddenly seemed like he had found a solution, and said seriously, "Seems like you guys are late today. I will be a good Samaritan. When Ju Yi arrives, don't speak. I'll tell her that I was the one who got the two of you to do some official business. That girl of yours won't spill the beans, will she? What did you say your name was? Hua Yuhao, right? What's the girl's name? I should at least know your names." "Her name is Wang Donga." Actually, teacher Zheng-Hua Yuhao wanted to explain, but teacher Ju and Wang Donga arrived right at that time. Ju Yi still had the same elderly made-up face, while Wang Donga followed beside her. There was a mischievous smile on her face. Ju Yi's deafening voice could already be heard before she even reached them. Who is it? I want to see which blind man dares to detain my students." Zheng Zhon was dumbfounded. He turned towards Hua Yuhao and forced a laugh as he said, "I think that girl has spilled the beans." There was no need to mention the intimacy Hua Yuhao felt when he saw Ju Yi, and he hurriedly explained, "Don't worry, teacher Zheng. It's all right." He darted out as he spoke and came in front of Ju Yi before he bowed deeply. His voice was quivering faintly as he said, "Teacher Ju." Ju Yi halted abruptly. She seemed to be overcome with astonishment, and tears glimmered in her eyes. However, Ju Yi was Ju Yi after all, and the way she expressed intimacy and affection was different from normal people. She raised her leg and immediately kicked Hua Yuhao on the side of his thigh. "Hua Yuhao, you still know to come back. You didn't visit me even when you returned. I wouldn't have known at all if I didn't hear it from Fan Yu. And you, Wang Dong, you've deceived me. So, you're a girl, and you're so pretty. You two people, what am I supposed to say about the two of you?" Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong's eyes turned red as they listened to Ju Yi's fierce and furious speech, and tears poured from their eyes. They would never forget the 2 years they had spent under Ju Yi's guidance. Ju Yi was strict, but she was also really nice to them. Everything felt so familiar when they listened to her voice. This was especially true for Hua Yuhao, as it had been 2 years since he had last seen Ju Yi. He reminisced about the old days nostalgically, and his emotions were all tumbling over themselves inside him. However, teacher Zheng didn't know what they were feeling inside. He could only see Ju Yi kick Hua Yuhao, so he briskly came forward and said, "Don't misunderstand, teacher Ju. Calm down, calm down." Ju Yi was slightly taken aback as she turned towards Zheng Zhon and asked confusedly, "What's the situation, teacher Zheng? Were you the one who detained my students?" Zheng Zhon forced a laugh and said, "I didn't." This, he didn't know how to explain. Hua Yuhao said hurriedly, "We were the ones at fault, teacher Ju. We've already apologized to teacher Zheng, and obtained his forgiveness." Ju Yi turned back towards Hua Yuhao. She was exceptionally high-spirited at this moment, so she nodded in Zheng Zhan's direction as she said, "Thank you, then. Can I take these two kids away?" Zheng Zhan came beside Ju Yi and spoke softly in earnest. "Teacher Ju, you should restrain your temper a little. You can't keep doing this. These kids toil so much from day to day in their cultivation, so you shouldn't be too fierce towards them. This may cause reverse psychology and incur rebellious behavior, and that's not good." Zheng Zhan finally understood after listening to her explanation. A look of envy came across his eyes as he said, "So they are the exemplary students that you've brought up, Teacher Ju." Ju Yi chortled and said, "Are you still going to report me to the academy?" Zheng Zhan laughed along and replied, "Of course not. But they are really so young." There was only pride in Ju Yi's eyes. Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong could be said to be the most outstanding students that she had ever taken on. Even though she wasn't one to brag, she was all joy and smiles when she saw her two lovely students. There wasn't a trace of her typical strictness and usual monster-like attitude. "All right, we'll take our leave first, Teacher Zheng. I haven't seen them in a long time, and we're going to have a chat." Ju Yi gestured towards Zheng Zhan and started to bring Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong away. Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong bowed towards Teacher Zheng respectfully. Huo Yuhao said softly, "Don't worry, Teacher Zheng. What happened today will never happen again. Sorry." Ju Yi had heard about the situation from Wang Dong before this. She stopped and turned back as she said, "Actually, their circumstances are relatively unique. If those little people have something to say, you can tell them this." She whispered something to Zheng Zhan after this, and then she brought Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong away. Zheng Zhan's eyes became a little lackadaisical, and he only recovered after a long while. He returned to his own students. "What are you looking at? How's your training going? Did you see those two seniors just now? They are your seniors from the inner courtyard. Do you know why they're holding hands? That's not because they're trying to break the academy's rules. I misunderstood them earlier. They're holding hands because they're cultivating. They're cultivating every single possible second. The two of them can use martial soul fusion skills, and only when their bodies are in physical contact can they unleash their full power. The two of them are always vigilant and prepared, and this is something every one of you should learn from them." Fortunately, Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong were quite a distance away. Otherwise, they would have probably blushed from Teacher Zheng's speech. They entered the senior grade school block, and Huo Yuhao asked Ju Yi, "How are the students from our class doing, Teacher Ju?" Ju Yi answered, "They're doing pretty fine. However, ever since the two of you left, Class 2 has been stronger than us in terms of overall strength." Mu Jin was extremely proud of that for a long time. However, Dai Huabin and the others are in the inner courtyard now, so Class 1 has become the strongest again. "I heard the two of you gave them a good beating yesterday." "That's great. You've vented my anger for me." Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong began to smile as they listened to Ju Yi's familiar tone. This was the Teacher Ju they liked the most. "Oh, yes, Teacher Ju, the new inner courtyard students are supposed to report to this school block, right? We want to take a look. Can we find you later?" Wang Dong asked. Ju Yi answered, "Let me take you there to avoid both of you being detained by other teachers again." "TSK, the two of you, do you really have to be so intimate all the time?" Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong instantly blushed and exchanged a look. They didn't dare to hold hands in the academy anymore. Ju Yi was much more familiar with the senior grade school block than they were. They twisted and turned around the corridors, and Ju Yi brought them to their destination. Huo Yuhao could already hear voices before they reached the room that new inner courtyard students were supposed to report to. "You can't wear a veil like that. If I remember correctly, you were like that during the assessment. You had a recommendation letter back then, so we didn't say much. However, you're about to join the academy soon. Are you really going to wear that veil around every single day? Even if you have some troubles deep in your heart that you can't discuss, the teachers responsible for registering you have to know so that we can record it. This is our duty and responsibility. If you refuse to take down your veil, then I'm sorry, you can't be allowed to join the academy." "Do I really have to take it down?" An enchanting voice could be heard, and Huo Yuhao trembled when he heard it. A look of astonishment flowed from his eyes. "Isn't this the voice I heard the other day?" He picked up his pace and walked forward quickly. When Huo Yuhao successfully took Wang Dong's hand during the Sea God's fate, Huo Yuhao thought that the Wang Chua that he had met was just an illusion and his hallucination, or it was just Wang Dong deliberately fooling around with him. However, the voice that fell into his ears now was just so real and true. He gasped in surprise before they even walked into the room. Wang Dong tugged on Huo Yuhao's sleeve and whispered, "What's wrong with you? Why are you in such a hurry?" Huo Yuhao lowered his voice and said, "The voice I just heard was extremely familiar. It was just like that Wang Chua I met the other day." They arrived at the room as they spoke. The room's door was open, and they could see what was happening inside. The first thing they saw were long locks of powdery blue hair. Both Huo Yuhao and Wang Dong were stunned on the spot when the flowing hair fell into their eyes. She had a lengthy white dress, long light blue hair, and her profile appeared identical to Wang Dong, except she was a little taller. Most of the people in the room were teachers at this moment, and there were about 4 to 5 of them. Their eyes seemed a little lackluster as they stared at the young woman. Hu Yuhao, Wang Dong, and Ju Yi were at the door, and the teachers could naturally see them. When they turned to look at Wang Dong's face, high-pitched gasps of surprise could be heard yet again. The young girl with wave-like hair turned around at this moment. Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong felt as if they had been struck by lightning. They stood there with sluggish eyes, their expressions completely frozen. The long-haired girl who had turned around also had a pair of huge blue eyes, and her gorgeous looks were identical to Wang Dong's. Besides the fact that she was slightly taller and more well-developed, there were hardly any differences between her and Wang Dong at all. Hu Yuhao's face froze. Did he just become a sexual predator? Don't misunderstand me, Wang Chua. I thought you were Dong when I saw you the other day, and I recognized the wrong person, so I decided to follow you. I lost you when we reached the city, Wang Chua said plainly. What else do you want? Hu Yuhao snapped his eyes around to Wang Dong. Wang Dong had recovered by now, but seemed like she was deep in thought. Nothing. Sorry to disturb you, Hu Yuhao replied to Wang Chua before he dragged Wang Dong out of the room. Something's not right, Yuhao. Wang Dong looked up and stared at Hu Yuhao with pondering eyes. Hu Yuhao frowned faintly and said, yes, something's not right. How can the two of you look so similar? It's unbelievable that the two of you aren't siblings. Why don't you send a letter to Uncle Nyo and Uncle Tai, and ask them if you actually do have a sister? Wang Dong shook her head and replied, no, I'm sure I don't have a sister. When I looked at her just now, I felt like something was off. It's not a feeling caused by blood relations. Her soul power undulations are vastly different from mine, and I can feel that her blood essence is exceptionally vigorous, possibly stronger than mine. However, she's not light type like me. Except for our looks, I don't think there's any other similarity between the two of us. Ju Yi had a skeptical expression as she asked, what's going on? Dong, I remember you've always been dressed like a guy. Perhaps Wang Chua made herself up to match your appearance. But what is her motive, then? All three of them were clueless, and nobody knew what was going on. Hu Yuhao's reaction was slightly faster. He contemplated momentarily and said, how about I go look for Dean Yang, and ask him to investigate her identity and background, along with her martial soul and her examination situation. It's truly difficult to believe that two people in the world can look so alike, but not be related by blood. Ju Yi snorted, you can't be so sure. The Doluor continent is vast, and there are all sorts of miracles and strange things. It's not as if two people who look so alike but are not related by blood have never been seen before. You two keep your cool. We will analyze this in more detail, and if we don't find anything amiss, then you two don't have to entangle yourselves with her anymore. You can treat her like a normal student. If she does have a motive, she will give the game away at some point. Wang Dong said, yes, that's all we can do. Yuhao, you haven't seen Teacher Ju for so long, you should stay and accompany her. I'll go look for Dean Yang. It's a good opportunity for me to compare her abilities and mine. Hu Yuhao nodded as he replied, all right. Wang Dong walked away briskly, and Hu Yuhao turned back towards Wang Chua in the room, who was wearing her veil again and carrying on with the registration. It was possible for two people who were not related by blood to look alike, but such identical appearances were truly extraordinary and unbelievable. Too many things had happened to him over the past 2 years, and it took a long time for him to recount everything. They were still talking when Wang Dong returned. Dong. Hu Yuhao stood up hurriedly when he saw her. Wang Dong said, I got the information. We are indeed different. Hu Yuhao gave her some space to sit down. Wang Dong's face was a little lost, and it was clear that she had run into a conundrum. What's the situation? Ju Yi asked. Wang Dong answered, her name is Wang Chua, and she's 19 years old, so she's slightly older than I am. She only has one martial soul, but it's an extremely rare pureblood dragon-type martial soul. Furthermore, it's a martial soul that's rarely seen even amongst dragon-type martial souls, the Golden Dragon. Hu Yuhao and Ju Yi exclaimed in astonishment at the same time, the ancestor of strength, the Golden Dragon? Wang Dong nodded. Both Hu Yuhao and Ju Yi were even more bewildered. Gold and silver had special meanings amongst top-tier soul beasts. Silver represented multiple elements, or that one possessed a formidable element. Such soul beasts could evolve, or they possessed a powerful innate ability. It was similar to the Silver Moon Wolf King that Hu Yuhao had come across back then. On the other hand, gold represented extreme bodily strength and power. Silver soul beasts were already extremely rare, but golden soul beasts were even more uncommon and exotic. It was hard to come by even a single one for many years, and some people had already claimed that golden soul beasts were long extinct. There wasn't a single golden soul beast amongst the known 10 great savage beasts in the world of soul beasts. Amongst the known golden soul beasts, the most reputable one was definitely this golden dragon. Legend had it that the dragon god had 2 children. One was the golden dragon who controlled strength and power, while the other was the silver dragon who controlled elemental laws and rules. The 2 of them had inherited a portion of the dragon god's powers. Over the passage of time, the golden dragon and the silver dragon gave birth to offspring, and their descendants gradually formed the entire dragon race. Dragons were almost extinct today, and few people alive had actually seen a real dragon on the Doluor continent. However, the legends and chronicles had always been there. The dragons who descended directly from the golden dragon and the silver dragon were the rarest amongst the dragons, but they were touted as the most pure-blooded species, and also known as the strongest of the dragons. Elder Mu's radiant holy dragon was only a subspecies of the silver dragon, a dragon that controlled the power of light. The golden dragon didn't have the all-inclusive elemental prowess that the silver dragon did, but the golden dragon possessed a strange power that could break through all things, and this was how its title, Ancestor of Strength, came about. Wang Dong's radiant butterfly goddess and Hue Yuhao's spirit eyes were already considered exceptionally rare. However, even Hue Yuhao's ice jade empress scorpion was inferior when compared to the golden dragon. This was because the golden dragon was also an ultimate martial soul, and its ultimate factor was strength. Ultimate strength was more powerful than a single ultimate element in the end. Hue Yuhao and Wang Donga could guess that Wang Chua was probably quite powerful, as she was able to join the inner courtyard as a student from another academy, but they hadn't expected her to be that powerful. Even though she didn't have twin martial souls, her martial soul was the strongest among all the martial souls that both Hue Yuhao and Wang Dong had ever seen. Ju Yi was full of admiration as she said, so someone on the continent actually inherited the golden dragon martial soul. She was a teacher from Shrek Academy, so she had the same intense longing for the golden dragon. If she hadn't been in front of her two students, she would have probably gone to check it out herself. Hue Yuhao quickly calmed down and said to Wang Dong, "In that case, her martial soul has nothing to do with you. We should just treat her like a normal student." Wang Dong pouted and said, "But, she looks just like me, what if you recognize the wrong person?" Hue Yuhao smiled and said consolingly, "It will be fine as long as that doesn't happen. We have the Haodong power, and we will feel it the moment we touch each other. No matter how powerful Wang Chua is, she doesn't share martial soul fusion skills with me, and she doesn't have our Haodong power. Don't think too much. We have to work a little harder now, we're not far from the start of the competition." Wang Dong nodded, she knew that Hue Yuhao was right. Wang Chua looked exactly like her, but even something was miraculous as this didn't prove anything. However, she still felt as if something was amiss from beginning to end. She could confirm that she wasn't related to Wang Chua by blood, but ever since she first laid eyes on her, and especially when she saw her eyes, Wang Donga still had that familiar feeling. They chatted idly with Ju Yi for a while longer before Hue Yuhao and Wang Donga bid their farewells. They had to pick up the pace when it came to their cultivation, and Hue Yuhao also had to swiftly conclude the situation with the spirits and hand the entire issue over to the Sea God's pavilion. On their way back to the Sea God's island, Wang Donga lowered her voice and said, "Yuhao, what you said yesterday was right. She does look more like the goddess of light in the raiment of light than I do. Do you think she's been sent by the heavens to steal you from me? Did you not say that the goddess of light was the image you fell in love at first sight with?" Hue Yuhao caressed her flowing hair, and he said in amusement, "Stop thinking about it. Have I not said this before? The goddess is right beside me. She will never be you, no matter how identical the two of you look. There's nothing at all between me and her, but we have been living together ever since we joined the academy. I've hugged you to sleep before, so you can't recant." "Hugged you to sleep? That sounds disgusting. I don't care, you have to stay away from her next time, alright?" Wang Donga spoke with a look of stubbornness and determination. Dragons were almost extinct today, and few people alive had actually seen a real dragon on the Doluor continent. However, the legends and chronicles had always been there. The dragons who descended directly from the golden dragon and the silver dragon were the rarest amongst the dragons, but they were touted as the most pure-blooded species, and also known as the strongest of the dragons. Elder Mu's radiant holy dragon was only a subspecies of the silver dragon, a dragon that controlled the power of light. The golden dragon didn't have the all-inclusive elemental prowess that the silver dragon did, but the golden dragon possessed a strange power that could break through all things, and this was how its title, Ancestor of Strength, came about. Wang Dong's radiant butterfly goddess and Hue Yuhao's spirit eyes were already considered exceptionally rare. However, even Hue Yuhao's ice jade empress scorpion was inferior when compared to the golden dragon. This was because the golden dragon was also an ultimate martial soul, and its ultimate factor was strength. Ultimate strength was more powerful than a single ultimate element in the end. Hue Yuhao and Wang Donga could guess that Wang Chua was probably quite powerful, as she was able to join the inner courtyard as a student from another academy, but they hadn't expected her to be that powerful. Even though she didn't have twin martial souls, her martial soul was the strongest among all the martial souls that both Hue Yuhao and Wang Dong had ever seen. Ju Yi was full of admiration as she said, "So someone on the continent actually inherited the golden dragon martial soul." She was a teacher from Shrek Academy, so she had the same intense longing for the golden dragon. If she hadn't been in front of her two students, she would have probably gone to check it out herself. Hue Yuhao quickly calmed down and said to Wang Dong, In that case, her martial soul has nothing to do with you. We should just treat her like a normal student. Wang Dong pouted and said, but, she looks just like me. What if you recognize the wrong person? Hua Yuhao smiled and said consolingly, it will be fine as long as that doesn't happen. We have the Haodong power, and we will feel it the moment we touch each other. No matter how powerful Wang Chua is, she doesn't share martial soul fusion skills with me, and she doesn't have our Haodong power. Don't think too much. We have to work a little harder now, we're not far from the start of the competition. Wang Dong nodded, she knew that Hua Yuhao was right. Wang Chua looked exactly like her, but even something was miraculous as this didn't prove anything. However, she still felt as if something was amiss from beginning to end. She could confirm that she wasn't related to Wang Chua by blood, but ever since she first laid eyes on her, and especially when she saw her eyes, Wang Dong still had that familiar feeling. They chatted idly with Ju Yi for a while longer before Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong bid their farewells. They had to pick up the pace when it came to their cultivation, and Hua Yuhao also had to swiftly conclude the situation with the spirits and hand the entire issue over to the Sea God's Pavilion. On their way back to the Sea God's Island, Wang Dong lowered her voice and said, Yuhao, what you said yesterday was right. She does look more like the goddess of light in the raiment of light than I do. Do you think she's been sent by the heavens to steal you from me? Did you not say that the goddess of light was the image you fell in love at first sight with? Hua Yuhao caressed her flowing hair, and he said in amusement, stop thinking about it. Have I not said this before? The goddess is right beside me. She will never be you, no matter how identical the two of you look. There's nothing at all between me and her, but we have been living together ever since we joined the academy. I've hugged you to sleep before, so you can't recant. Hugged you to sleep? That sounds disgusting. I don't care, you have to stay away from her next time, alright? Wang Dong spoke with a look of stubbornness and determination. Hua Yuhao returned directly to his room once they reached the Sea God's Island, and began to write down the steps to create spirits, along with the pact sealing spell. This was the most important thing at hand to him. Wang Dong didn't disturb him, and cultivated by herself to one side. Hua Yuhao took an entire day to pen down the method of creating spirits, and added to be verified at the end. There hadn't been enough experiments or trials on spirits yet, and it couldn't be pushed out as the norm. There was far too much to do. Refining, perfecting, and making the creation process as safe as it could be wasn't something that could be done in a year or two. No matter how wealthy Shrek Academy was and how many resources they possessed, there was still a lot of work to be done. The hardest component to settle was searching for soul beasts in their declining years for negotiation and discussions. It was already difficult to find old soul beasts, and it was even harder to find intelligent ones. Shrek Academy would have to find old soul beasts with intelligence, and those with a mentality that leaned towards a fear of death, because only then would they choose the path of a spirit. The most troublesome part about creating a spirit pact was that these soul beasts had to volunteer, and they had to be entirely agreeable. The spirit pact would transcend soul rings, and the soul beast's acceptance was probably the most important part of that process. Hua Yuhao recorded everything down, then sought out Yang Shaozhe and showed it to him before anything else. He described everything in detail, and went over it several times before he rearranged his draft and handed it over to Elder Xian. Elder Xian immediately sealed the final draft into the library of the Sea God's Pavilion. According to Elder Xian, the library of the Sea God's Pavilion was well fortified, and Shrek Academy would probably have ceased to exist if this place was broken into. It was late into the night by the time everything was settled. Even with Hua Yuhao's vitality and endurance, he could still feel intense exhaustion and fatigue. Staying inside the Sea God's Pavilion was convenient. After he finished the job with Elder Xian, he returned to his room directly. Wang Dong was not yet asleep, but neither was she cultivating. Instead, she was quietly waiting for him by the table. There were 4 exquisite dishes laid out there, along with a bowl of porridge. You're back. Let me heat it up. Wang Dong immediately stood up and started to pour the food into boxes. Hua Yuhao stepped forward hurriedly and said, there's no need, I like to eat cold food. I'm sorry, Dong, it's my fault for being late. You must have been waiting anxiously for a long time. You should go ahead and rest first. If something like this happens again, you don't have to wait for me. Wang Dong looked up and stared at Hua Yuhao with a slightly dazed look. She could tell that he was a little exhausted, but his eyes were still filled with warmth, and his gaze was just so serene and tender. She told herself in her heart, this man is mine. Why do I love waiting for him, and why do I enjoy the feeling of waiting for him to return so much? Hua Yuhao stared into Wang Dong's blue eyes, and pulled her back down onto her seat. What's wrong? What are you thinking about? Are you still thinking about that Wang Chua? He filled a bowl of porridge for Wang Dong as he spoke. Wang Dong hurriedly pushed it back to him. I've already eaten. You should eat quickly. Fortunately, the porridge is still warm. You should teach me how to cook. That way, I don't have to find food for you from the canteen, and I can make a meal for you myself. Hua Yuhao shook his head without hesitation. No, Wang Dong was perplexed as she exclaimed, why not? Sentimental attachment. Hua Yuhao stared at her white and pale hands and said, I don't want you to worry about any day-to-day things at all. I want you to live like a queen. I should be the one cooking for you every day. I will take care of you, I will shower you with love, and I will stay by your side for eternity. He said all this while he was still eating. However, the way he said was so natural, as if everything had long been engraved into his bones, and he was simply expressing everything matter-of-factly. Faint tears began to well up in Wang Dong's charming eyes. You're so good to me, Yuhao. Hua Yuhao laughed and said, why are you crying when I'm being nice to you? Stop crying. It's useless to just say these things. I will prove my words with actions. He flexed his lean right arm as he spoke. Wang Dong giggled and said, don't forget, you're still a soul king. Hua Yuhao said, this has nothing to do with strength, mentality is the key. Wang Dong laughed and said, let's not talk about all that. The sea god's fate concluded soon after we left. He Kaitu and Xiao Xiao finally got together. They didn't have it easy, and the truth is that I could tell fifth senior sister was conflicted inside, but she chose him in the end. What's inside is far more important than appearance. Second senior brother may be a little ugly, and he's a little too dark-skinned, but he's truly very good to her. Hua Yuhao didn't know what to say anymore. The academy was concerned for his safety, so it was hard for him to object to that. However, he actually needed a soul ring, and Wang Dong still wanted to monitor and investigate Wang Chua. Cai Maya pondered momentarily before saying, all right, let's do it this way. I will report this to Elder Shen after I return to the Sea God's Island, and it should be fine as long as Elder Shen agrees. Lushuan is leading this group, but if the two of you do participate in the end, we might have to add 1 or 2 more teachers to tag along. They left Cai Maya's office, and Wang Dong couldn't help but laugh and comment, see, you're now a VIP. The academy is making a big fuss about this, but it's not about me, it's clear that this is all about you. Hua Yuhao laughed along and said, don't undervalue yourself. Don't forget that you're also the heir to the Clear Sky sect, and the academy must ensure your safety as well. Dean Cai is trying to guard against surprises. We have been to the Great Stardow Forest many times, and if we don't meet 100,000-year soul beasts, we will definitely be able to escape with our lives with our current cultivation. They returned to the Sea God's Island, where they went straight to Bei Bei and Shu Sanchi's dorm. They could hear the cacophony of laughter and banter as soon as they walked through the door. You have to treat everyone, Kaitu. I wonder how a pretty flower like Xiao Xiao could have chosen you. Shu Sanchi's hearty laughter could be heard. He Kaitu didn't back down at all. That's right, a pretty flower like Nan Nan has chosen to plant herself on a pile of shit like you. You shouldn't have walked away with him that day, Nan Nan. Look at him. He's so proud and happy that his eyes have almost grown to the top of his head. Shu Sancha was sprawled out inside the living room, while he Kaitu was sitting on a chair not far from him, bickering with him. Jiang Nan Nan and Xiao Xiao were cleaning up the room on the other side, and they casually ignored the banter as they whispered into each other's ears second senior brother, third senior brother, fourth senior sister, fifth senior sister. Hua Yuhao called out the moment he walked in. All 4 of them looked over, but the first person they looked at was Wang Dong. Wang Dong evaded everyone's gazes and hid behind Hua Yuhao. What are you looking at? Have you never seen me before? Shu Sancha laughed out loud and said, we've seen you before, but we only recognize Wang Dong, and not Wang Dong. Where's this pretty lady from? Come on out, let me tease you a little. Ayo, your skin must be itchy, Jiang Nannan said as she withdrew the duster she had just whipped across Shu Sanchi's back. Shu Sancha hurriedly smiled at her and said, Wang Dong has lied to us for so long, don't you think she deserves to be teased? I don't mean anything else, you're the only one I love in this entire world, get lost. Jiang Nannan kicked him angrily, and then circled behind Hua Yuhao and dragged Wang Dong out. Bei Bei's voice could be heard from upstairs at this moment. That must be Yuhao and Wang Dong. All right, everyone's here. Bei Bei came down from upstairs. He was still dressed like he had always been, and one couldn't tell anything was different from his expression. However, everybody else's expressions changed a little, and the 3 couples toned down their intimacy and affection. There was still no news about Xiao Ya, even today. Everyone knew how painful Bei Bei's heartache was, so nobody wanted to provoke him or upset him in that way. Bei Bei walked down the stairs and came before everyone. It's been more than 2 years, and we're all finally back together again. It hasn't been easy, we have a few more months before the next season's competition will begin. I know we are all very confident, but we cannot be too complacent and careless. We have to look down on our opponents as part of our strategy, but we have to be careful with our battle tactics. Come, let's find a place to exercise a little. Everyone will take this chance to show each other how we have improved over the years. Shu Sancha jumped to his feet and said, I'm with Hua Yuhao and Nan Nan. You can pick the rest however you like. These 2 equally reputable prodigies would lead one team respectively during every one of their sparring sessions. Shu Sancha didn't forget to make the first move to gain the upper hand. Evione had seen Hua Yuhao's display of prowess during Sea God's fate, and his spirit eyes naturally provided extremely formidable support. The presence or absence of Hua Yuhao's support would determine which side would win the fight. Bei Bei snapped, "You think you're clever? Let's go, we'll talk about it later." The inner courtyard students had a place set aside specifically for sparring. They didn't have to go to the outer courtyard. They couldn't be vying with the outer courtyard students for a sparring venue. The inner courtyard's venue for practice battles was located on a hill that was roughly 100 meters high, near the eastern side of the Sea God's Island. The top of this hill seemed like it had been shaved and flattened. Besides the Sea God's Pavilion itself, this was the highest location in the entire Sea God's Island. There was a patch of flat irregular land on the hilltop that was about 100 meters in diameter. Tough but uneven granite of stunning durability was laid out over the ground. It was connected to the hill itself, and thus the flooring was exceptionally tough. Chu Qingtian's voice could be heard in response. "You want to talk about reason, eh? You're an assault-type soul master, and your Golden Crow primordial fire is not far from ultimate fire. I'm an agility-type soul master, so how can I face you head-on? If I make a go for it, then it won't be a practice battle anymore, but suicide. You can't murder your own husband, can you? What husband? Are we married?" The sparring pair were Chu Qingtian and Wu Ming. After Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong'er left the other day, the two of them also successfully completed the last segment, Eternal Love. With Wu Ming around, who would want to fight her for her man? That person would have been asking for trouble. Wang Yang and Han Ruoruo were spectating on the other side. They watched Wu Ming and Chu Qingtian, and they smiled faintly from time to time while they occasionally glanced at each other, at which point their smiles would become a little warmer. It was apparent that they were having a good time together. Teacher Wang, senior sister Han, Bei Bei took the lead as he greeted them both. Wang Yang and Han Ruoruo naturally saw them as well, and they both stood up to greet everyone. Han Ruoruo didn't have an obvious reaction, but Wang Yang began to feel a bit surreal. He knew the Shrek 7 monsters too well, after all, and the entire process of him courting and wooing Han Ruoruo had fallen into these little fella's eyes. But Wang Yang quickly returned to normal, however, and he asked with a subtle smile on his face, "Why are you guys here?" Bei Bei said, "The competition is going to start, and everyone is here. We should take this chance to spar and practice, so we can all see how we have improved over the years. We can also take this chance to train our coordination and teamwork." Wang Yang had a look of revelation on his face as he said, "Yes, time really flies. It's been 5 years in the blink of an eye, and everyone has grown up. I still remember Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong were only this tall during the last competition." He gestured with his hand to show height as he spoke, and he turned towards Wang Dong'er. "I have only just found out that you are a girl, and you're so pretty. Did you know about this before, Yuhao, and you've been hiding it from us? Puppy love is not right." Hua Yuhao blushed and forced a laugh as he said, "I'm also a victim." Wang Dong'er shot a glare in his direction and whispered, "How are you the victim? All right, you're the victim." Hua Yuhao changed tack as quickly as he could. Beside Wang Yang, Han Ruoruo was amused by their bickering as she laughed and said, "Don't forget about the spirit that you're supposed to explain to everyone, Hua Yuhao." Hua Yuhao replied, "Don't worry, senior sister. I've already reported the business with spirits in detail to the Sea God's Pavilion, and I believe it won't take long before the inner courtyard disciples will be setting up for trials and experimentation. However, how it's going to be carried out exactly is still up to the academy. Dean Yang is directly responsible for this." Wang Yang's eyes sparkled. "That's going to be a new topic for our curriculum. Dean Yang has told me to look for him tonight about this matter." That was an impressive innovation. "Yuhao." Hua Yuhao chortled and said, "That has nothing to do with me, it's the academy's research. I'm just the first guinea pig." He had already thought this through. Since he had announced that he would give everything to do with spirits to the academy, then the way he discussed it would also have to change. He would rather accord all research credit to the academy as a way of him giving back to the academy. Wang Yang stared deeply into his eyes. He was the vice head of Shrek Academy's Martial Soul Research Institute, and was extremely clear about what direction the academy's research had taken in recent years. However, he didn't question how Hua Yuhao had explained things. On the other side, Wu Ming and Chu Qingtian stopped when they saw everyone. Chu Qingtian seemed like he was drenched with sweat, and he wore an expression as if he had been liberated while he walked over with Wu Ming. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.